Welcome back to Drum Electric. So in this video, we are going to be looking at how to use a drum trigger to trigger a gate on an audio channel. So for example, I've got a snare drum, I want to put a gate on it, but I'm getting bleed from the rest of the kit. How do I fix that? I'm going to put a trigger on it. So every time I hit the drum, the trigger is going to send a signal to my gate, and that's what's going to open and close the gate. So when I hit the toms, when I hit other cymbals, anything apart from that drum, the gate is not going to open because nothing has triggered the trigger. It's really, really useful and it's really, really fun. So I'm going to show you how to do this in Logic because it's really easy. You don't have to have any of the equipment that I'm using. All you need is a drum trigger, something to convert that into essentially MIDI or a signal to a laptop. And then you just need to follow the same steps that I'm using. In this case, I'm going to be doing it on Logic to record, but like I say, the steps are the same, you just need to apply it to whichever software and hardware that you are using. So let's get into it. The hardware that I'm using in this particular video is quite simple. So for starters, the trigger that I'm going to be using is the RT-30HR by Roland. That is going into the Roland SPD-SX. Out of the back of there, I've got two MIDI cables going into the Focusrite 18920. And then from there, that's just USB into my M1 Max MacBook Pro, the 16-inch version, and that's running Logic. It's a pretty standard setup, but like I said, you don't have to have any of that. All you kind of really need is any of the triggers, and then just a method of getting that signal out and into whichever software you're using. This does work on both Windows and Mac, and in this case, the new M1 chips. So let's hop into Logic, and I'll show you how this works. So the first thing is you're going to see this screen, it's the normal thing. I'm going to choose an audio track because I'm going to use this just on the snare drum, but you can apply this to the full drum kit if you want to, or you can choose whichever drum you want. So I'm just going to name this snare and make sure that it's input 1 because that's where my snare is going into, so it's all good there. Now, normally what we do, audio effects, use the noise gate. I'm just going to use the inbuilt for this, and this is what it looks like, and this is the normal way that I used to do it until I found the ways of the trigger. So I'm going to keep that there for now because we will need a gate. So first things first is actually on the SPD-SX itself. You want to check your MIDI settings on the SPD-SX. Now I'm doing this with the MIDI cables. You can do this with the USB MIDI, so you don't have to go out and find a 5-pin MIDI cable. If you don't have one, you can just use the USB output of the SPD-SX, which is quite nice. So what you want to do is just head into Menu, Kit, and then MIDI. And this is where all of the MIDI channels are going to be accessed and things like that. So, for example, all of my pads are being sent out of pad channel 1 and then MIDI notes 1 through 9 because there's 9 pads on the SPD-SX itself. For the triggers, you can hit Exit, go into Setup, and then go down to Trig In. I've got mine plugged into triggers output 3 and 4, and because it's the HR, so it can send 2 trigger outputs from the rim and the center of the drum, that means I can have the input mode as head and rim, and it'll come up as 3 and 4. Now this is really important. So if you're doing exactly the same as me and you've got a dual trigger like this, then what you'll want to do is hit Exit, go back into Kit, and then scroll all the way across till you hit triggers 3 and 4. And then you want to make sure those settings are exactly the same if you're using this trigger solely for the gate. Because what can happen with the dual trigger, if you hit the center of the drum, it'll trigger the gate, great. But if you hit the rim, it won't trigger the gate. And that can be really annoying because it means that the gate sometimes work, sometimes won't work. So I've just set it to pad channel 1 and then MIDI note 7 because 7 seemed like a nice number. The only way to choose numbers is making sure that it doesn't clash with other ones. Now, this is only with one trigger. If you're using a full kit, say for example you've got a kick trigger, a snare trigger, and then toms, then the way to change this is with the pad channel. So for now, because I'm using one trigger on the snare drum, pad channel 1. If I had a kick drum trigger, I'd then use a plus button and change that to pad channel 2. What we want to do in Logic is a new software instrument track. I'm going to rename that as, sorry, my snare trigger. Oh my lord, there we go. Snare trigger. I'm just going to change it to a multi-sample because I don't actually want it to send out a sound. I just need some sort of thing for it to send. So we can literally just leave that. I'm going to check that it's actually cool. So it's picking up, it's just not making a sound, which is perfect. Close this. I'm going to hit the X button to bring up the mixer, or you can go Window, view mixer. Turn off these buses because we don't have any effects, so we don't need to send it anywhere. It's just purely for looks at this point. And then this is the important bit. Output, bus 1, or whichever one you have free, because then with our gate back on the audio channel, still with me, we're going to then sidechain that to bus 1. So now all that means is whenever we get a signal in from our software instrument, that is the signal that the trigger on our audio channel is going to pick up. Rather than using the input from the microphone, it uses the trigger. And it's pretty much as simple as that. So if I now hit it, you can see on the gate here, which is on the audio channel, it's currently closed, and every time I hit it, open. Oh, need to make sure I've armed the software track. There we go. Open, 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 open. So what I can do to make sure that no sound is coming out of that channel, because sometimes the sample, I can add a sample to it, is I can actually mute the bus, because you'll still get a signal through. That's as simple as that. Now, this part is the interesting part, and that's where we want to change the gate settings so it matches the length of the snare drum. Okay, so what I like to do is just move the attack up to about a 10 to 15 milliseconds, just purely because the trigger signal coming in is going to be quicker than the input of the microphone by a few milliseconds, and that's just purely because of flow. Obviously, the microphone's got to go through a cable, through an audio interface, into here, and then produce the sound. And then the hold, I tend to whack up to about 350, 340, 350, and then the release, similar thing, because it just gives enough time, especially if we're playing ghost notes, for the gate to open and close accordingly. We'll adjust all of that when we hop behind the kit in a second. So that's logic, and it's really helpful. Now, I mentioned about the pad channel on the SPD-SX, and that is because if you have multiple triggers, then you could head into the MIDI settings here on the left-hand side, and then MIDI port, you can go for the 18920, or if you're plugging in with USB, it'll just show up as the SPD-SX. MIDI in channel is 1, and that means it'll only pick up the MIDI channel from channel 1. On the SPD-SX, I'm going to go to Menu, Kit, Pad channel 1 for pad 7 in this case, and as you can see, it's all working. Now if I change that to pad channel 2, I get nothing. You can see a little bit of signal on the snare trigger here. That's actually because of the microphone behind me is picking it up, but nothing. But that means then if we change the MIDI channel on here to 2, it works again. So that's how you do it for multiple triggers. You'd set the pad channel on the SPD-SX to the same one that you want that trigger to do. So that's logic, and that's pretty much the method that we're going to now use across all software, which is quite nice. Now don't forget, when you're recording this, you'll need to record the MIDI channel as well. Or if you're playing live, is make sure that MIDI channel is live, basically, is picking up the signal input, because otherwise it won't work. It's still got that live element where it's got to send the signal through to each channel. But that's how it's done. It's as easy as that. And it's great. So I'm going to hop on the kit behind me, and I'm going to show you the differences between having the snare gate triggered versus how I would normally have it as just a gate on the audio channel. And it's quite a substantial difference. And that's that. That's how you can use a drum trigger, any drum trigger, to trigger a gate, open and close. And it's really, really useful, especially if you do get a lot of bleed from the kit as well. So it's really good live, especially if you're adding it into like an Ableton backing track rig. It's really nice in that sense. And there we go. If you have any questions, please lob them in the comments down below, or shoot me a DM on any of the social medias that Drum Electric is on, and I'd love to help out. But for now, I hope this has helped, and I look forward to seeing you in all of our shiny new videos. And I hope you have a great day.